Okay, so after a few technical issues, we're back with another edition of Submissive Asia. I know that there are one or two other channels out there which are far more advanced than mine. I'm just putting up a few videos and seeing what happens. Very early days, and I'm not very good technically, but I promise you guys I'll do my best to pick up the technical side of things and improve both that and my delivery. So if I'm waffling a bit, please bear with me. I'll get better as I go on, and I'm sort of doing these videos in between work and other things. It's a Friday night here. It's been a rather long week, and I've also had a few other issues that I'm dealing with, so please bear with me. I'll work on having a tighter script and better tech. I want to try and keep this video, if I can, to 10 to 15 minutes, 10 at best, 15 at most. And really what we're going to discuss today is a fairly discrete topic, which is monkey branching in Asia, NAWALTs, or those women in the haystack that we think are extinct in the West and somehow plentiful here in the East. And if that's true, and if the sort of the idea of submissive Asian women is true, and we can discuss that, because these are common perceptions which are out there, particularly in the West and other places. But before we get into that, I think we just need to give some background to the concept of what is Asia. Well, it depends how you define it. Asia is a very, very big place, probably geographically the biggest place or the biggest grouping on the planet, certainly in terms of population. If you look at China, it's like almost 1.5 billion people. That's 1/5 of the world's population. 1 in every 5 people is Chinese. And that's just based on people within mainland China. You also need to remember there are very large Chinese ethnic communities throughout the world, particularly in Southeast Asia. 30% of Malaysia is Chinese, 5% I think of Indonesia. Can't remember the Philippines, obviously, and then you have Chinese countries which are sovereign. So Singapore is ethnically majority Chinese, and obviously you have Taiwan, although that's disputed that it's actually a country, and then you have autonomous regions of China such as Hong Kong and Macau. So China, Asia as a whole, forget about China, is huge, and the relevance of that is the differences are massive. It's like saying all white people are the same. Obviously they're not. It's like saying Latinos, North Americans and Europeans are all the same, and there are massive differences. I mean, with certain groups within Asia, there are some common traits and common cultural connections, like there is in Western Europe, with those countries which were conquered by the Romans and share a common Latin language heritage, and Judeo-Christian beliefs that underlie things. In some parts of Asia you have that, although what we're talking about in terms of the cultural influence is China, with their massive cultural overhang into places all around Asia, with things such as their alphabet, their cuisine. When I say alphabet, I mean it's not phonetic, but the Chinese script is obviously used in Japan, and it used to be used in places like Vietnam, and it is the cultural strength of China, which has been on the wane was on the wane for 200, 300 years, is very strong again. Anyway, the point is that the differences in this region, the diversity is huge, much bigger than any other place on the planet. You have, someone in Japan, in probably the most developed, arguably overdeveloped country that exists. It's an awesome place. But a Japanese girl is going to be completely different to a Muslim farm girl living in a village on the outskirts of Yogyakarta in Indonesia. I mean, they're going to be universes apart, both in terms of obviously language, but cultural standards and beliefs, religion versus no religion, socio-economic, education, money, and other outlooks. Okay, so you just have to bear that in mind. What I'm going to focus on in the next 5 or so minutes is those women more prevalently in the more developed parts of Asia, who primarily will probably be, Chinese. And when I say Chinese, I mean those within, Hong Kong, Macau, Singapore, mainland China, and then to a lesser extent Korea and Japan. Obviously not Chinese, but North Asia as well. So put them all into the bucket. The developed and developing parts of Asia. Okay, and even within those groups, there are again big differences. But let's focus on that. Okay, first of all, this idea of the submissive Asian woman, it is a myth. It is a complete myth, in my view. We hear a lot about women who, they played the chameleon. Well, the chameleon is alive and well in Asia, particularly with those women who get with Western men. Some guys will think, wow, this girl, she does whatever I say, she's interested in the things that I'm interested in, I'm really in charge of this relationship. And then things get serious or they get married and boom, the lady is in control. And I think the thing you need to also realise, particularly in Chinese culture, it's still strong, even though, families are not having 8 or 9 children anymore. 1 or 2 children is the norm. But the reality remains that when you marry into a family, let's just take China as an example. When you marry a girl, you don't just marry the girl, you marry her family. Okay? You marry her family. It's really, really different. And that's the important thing to remember. And women are not submissive. So, an example would be in Japan. Japan, they are rejecting marriage this generation completely, both men and women. So it's not the best example, but in generations past, the man would be literally the ox, the wage slave, the salary man as they call it there, and the woman would actually control literally the purse strings, and the guy would have absolutely no control over finances. He would be given pocket money. There's even a word for it in Japanese, I believe, where he would be given his play money, which was not very much, and the woman controlled everything. And that's the way that it is. So this idea that men rule the roost, it's I don't think it's particularly accurate. Women can be also emotionally demanding from their men, and I find that local guys will pander to these emotions to carrying the purse or the handbag, or putting up with hissy fits or demands for material goods, okay, such as handbags or other stuff. Depending on where you are in Asia, materialism and using material goods to judge the value of someone is alive and well. It is actually much worse than the West, where you drive a good car, okay, but here, in some places they call it the 5 C's: car, cash, country club, condominium, credit card. The 5 C's. So if you don't have the 5 C's, good luck getting a date. Okay. So coming up on the 10-minute mark here. But as I said, just a few things. The idea of the submissive woman is just it's false by and large. That doesn't really exist, and if it does exist, it's during the honeymoon phase. It will go. Just keep your eyes open. Just be aware of that. And if you're an expat working in Asia and you are making decent coin, you're making good money, you're going to be an attractive target, particularly if you're anywhere between the ages of, say, 28 and 40, particularly 28 and 35, your prime target, your prime meat, right? They even have a term for it. Here's my meat, right? So, just be aware that it's not real. Now, along with this idea of the submissive woman comes the monkey branching and what is termed reverse monkey branching. Now, I've seen it with a number of friends where, the girl is approaching 30, okay, or 29 or 28. Now, particularly with Chinese girls, it's more prevalent in mainland China. If a girl is 25, she's considered over the hill. Now, to me and to others, that might seem insane. But maybe they're onto something, right? But they tend to marry young, culturally. And what that means is that if a girl is approaching, in other places in Asia, say Hong Kong or Singapore, it's a bit older, right? So maybe 30. If she hasn't reached, if she's reached 30, her sexual market value just plummets. And guys here, they really do, it's a real thing here. It's not just recognised amongst certain communities. It's brutal. Okay. The result of that, though, is that if you are not committed to that girl, you might have been together for 5 years. Okay. You could have been the best boyfriend in the world. You could have bought her great gifts. You could have gone on wonderful trips together. You could have done all sorts of things. You could be the best boyfriend in the world. But if you have not shown her that you are quote-unquote serious and going to lock in, and this might even happen during the honeymoon phase, she might say to you, I'm not entering into this relationship with you unless you're serious. Because I want this to be the last relationship that I'm in. It can be that transactional. Honestly, women will say that to you up front. Right? In the West, you'd fucking run a mile. Here, it's standard practice. They'll say to you, what are your intentions? Up front. And you can't say, look, I just want to date for a while and or it's, well, of course you can say those things, but it might be hard for you. It's a transaction, guys. That's the way it works up here. What you can do, of course, is you can lie. And, that could be you lying to yourself when you tell her, look, for the right girl, I'd be prepared to settle down or wherever it might be. Or it could be you lying to the girl, knowing full well you have no intention of ever, putting a ring on a finger, okay, or any girl for that matter. The risk with that strategy, though, is that, no matter, we're not robots, guys. We are not machines. We're made out of flesh and blood, and as men, we're programmed to take the blue pill and to be that guy. And very few guys can be so mercenary that if you choose to be monogamous with a girl, right, and see her exclusively, if that's you, and that goes on for years, you've got to be really careful, because no matter what, and you can even tell yourself, I'm never going to marry her, blah, blah, blah. But, mate, the reality is, she can walk out on you at any time. And women up here can be brutal, right? And if they see a chance to jump to some guy they will. And there's even a saying for it in Chinese. It's called, well, in English it is something like ride the ox to catch the horse. So, stick with your ordinary guy for long enough until you find the better guy. I mean, that's flat out monkey branching. There's even a Chinese idiom to that extent, right? So they're very pragmatic and practical and transactional, and they don't pretend. In a way, it's a good thing, because at least you know what you're getting into, okay? At least you know. But, yeah, be aware of it. And be very careful, because even if you tell yourself you're not going to get involved, it's very likely that you will, particularly if it drags on for any extended period of time. So if you're going to date a girl here, expect her to want something serious very quickly, and you've got to really be careful that, unless that's of course what you want, that you play those cards very carefully, because the girl will cut you, and she will have, if you think that because she's somehow been that doting girlfriend and, really done what you wanted inside and outside the bedroom and taking care of you and being loving and, never ever raised a voice against you, blah, 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 man, you're an idiot, right? Because most of the time with these girls, this is a show to get you to the point where you're committed. Most girls have a 2-year rule. If you haven't given her a ring by the 2-year mark, mate, she'll drop you hotter than a bag of fucking hot rocks. Okay? So get your head straight. Don't think you can somehow come up here and just play the numbers and or delay something with somebody because she's some submissive. That's chameleon behaviour, and they're great at it. And you'll come home one day, or you'll meet up for a date, and she'll be like, "It's over. I've met someone else." Fuck, boom. And unless you're alive to that fact, it can really affect you. So don't be a fool. See things for what they really are. Don't sleepwalk through relationships with people. And believe that something's going to drag on forever. That girl will want a ring on her finger because her sexual market value is plummeting. Plummeting. The closer she approaches 30 and you're not showing solid signs of commitment, she's already got one foot out the door. She's already talking to other guys. And I know. I've seen it. Right? Multiple times. With friends, etc. So this is a reality. Okay. Now, reverse monkey branching. For those that don't know, monkey branching is, of course, when a girl looks to find another guy while she's in a relationship with somebody. She's holding into that branch before she swings. And a lot of women do that all over the world, not just in Asia. But there's this fallacy that it doesn't happen here. And it happens here all the time. Okay? The girl finds some other guy through her friends or work or however, right? And she takes that option. Often out of fear. And, I would say, often out of pressure from her parents. And this is the other thing, finally. So I'm 5 minutes over time here, but if you are not Chinese, okay, or Japanese, or whatever the race may be, it's going to be difficult for you, particularly if you do not speak the language, even if you do, okay? Now, I'm not saying families here are not accepting of foreigners, less so in mainland China, but, here in, outside China, more westernized societies such as Singapore and Hong Kong, okay, there's going to be more openness to it, particularly in a place like Singapore, okay, where there is a lot of racial mixing between the three main ethnic groups there being Indians, Malays and Chinese. But let's say in Hong Kong, for example, it is harder, right? Some families will not accept you. And just imagine as well, right? From the parents' perspective, if you do not speak Cantonese, which is the dialect in Hong Kong, right? And you as a parent, you come from some, working class. The girl comes from working class background, living in housing commission. Her parents work very humble jobs, probably making 1/10 of what you do, or 1/5 of what you do. And they're not educated, etc. And probably those parents have put everything into that child, right? And we can get into that in another video, but they might have put everything into that kid. That's their investment. Because that's the other thing that's really different up here. Children are investments. Okay? They're not like children in the West where, we support children's individualism and children make choices. No. There's this concept here called filial piety, which is, basically, deference and following the parents' lead, okay? And parents invest in their kids because, in times gone past, there was no social security and, kids here, Chinese kids, will give a percentage of their salary to their parents, like food and board, okay? A significant portion, all right? A meaningful portion, not a small amount, right? And that is what a good son or child does. Now, okay, this is the kicker. If you marry a girl here as well, as I said, when you marry into a family here, you become part of that family. Now, if that girl's not loaded, and then they'll probably not want you unless you're fucking loaded too, the parents that is, you'll probably, if the parents are, not in a great financial position, you'll be expected to support her parents as well as, if you do already, your own, right? That's what a good son-in-law does. So, girls, when they're looking at you, are looking at the potential that you bring to being a good provider, not just for her children and offspring, but for her parents. Mate, you're the ATM. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that's actually even a bad thing. It's culturally normal. But that's where the monkey branching comes in. Okay? If they don't think they can lock you down by the time their sexual market value has dropped, because even they look at themselves as a commodity, they will go to another guy. And that guy doesn't even have to be better than you. This is the weird thing. He doesn't even have to be better than you. He can be, on an objective measure, inferior to you. He can be a simp, a beta, worse in bed, make half of what you make. Okay? Not be that great. As long as he commits, or gives the impression that he's going to commit, that's enough to lock a girl down, particularly if she gets to that crazy age of 29, 30. She'll go. And often, what will happen in those circumstances is the girl will get pumped and dumped. Pumped and dumped. So the relationship gets wrecked. She goes to the other guy. You could have been together for years. She gets pumped and dumped. And yeah, you don't hear from her again. Or if you do, this is where the reverse monkey branching comes in, she then realizes, geez, that guy basically used me. Well, not basically, he did. Literally, And then what you'll often see, unlike girls in the West, the girl will come back to you. Okay? With so many of my friends this has happened. The girl's been approaching 30, she's getting baby rabies, much earlier than what happens in the West, because she thinks she's not going to find a guy by the time she hits 30, and if she does, post 30, she's going to have to settle for the dregs, and because she wants to hit a mark before her market value drops, right? So often they'll try and swing back to you. My advice: never, ever, ever take them back. Okay? Never. And it's not because they realise they made a mistake. Well, it is. But it's not an emotional mistake. It's not that they realise, I love that guy. Nothing to do with that. It's because they realise the guy that they jumped to, who was often inferior to you, was some fucking cuck, right, that had been chirping away at her for months, and she thought, well, I'm not making any headway on this guy, he's not going to commit to me, so, I better take this other inferior option because I'm almost past my expiry date. Seriously, I swear to God. Beware of it. It's the commitment trap. And so many foreigners fall into this trap in Asia. So many. Because they don't understand the psyche. And also because in the West, girls don't have this issue at such a young age. It comes a bit later. Right? And so that baby's rabies, they'll jump from you to another guy and they'll have fucking unprotected sex with that dude. Because they're so fucking crazy at that time. Right? So just protect yourself, guys. Just be wary. That young Asian girl that you're dating, that you think is, so lovely and submissive, and you've been seeing her for 2.5 years or whatever it may be, and not really, you're committed and stuff, and you're in a nice space with her, but you haven't. She's raised marriage tentatively with you, but you haven't really gone into that discussion. Trust me. If you haven't got into that discussion, she's discussing it with someone else, because that's the way it is, and she's monkey branching. So be aware. Most girls here, the place is entirely commodified, and everyone's aware of this. Local guys will say, because I'm friends with local guys and foreign guys will complain. Oh, my girlfriend, I don't know what happened. We were happy and together for a couple of years, and then she just ran off with some other guy. Often a local guy, and my local friends will laugh. They'll say, "Well, did you talk about marriage?" Oh, well, kind of casually, but I said, it's going to be a couple of years. No further discussions. Well, you didn't know what was going on. You don't understand the market. The market is, if you've had no chats like that before you're 30, before she's 30, she's going to be having them with someone else. You're leaving the door open. And depending on what you want, you might want to leave the door open. You don't give a shit, but just be wary. Okay. That's enough. Talk to you guys later.